We anticipate in the next 10 to 12 years, approximately 8 to 6 million Hispanics coming into the United States and 41 million Asians. You have been the majority minority for 400 years in this country. You have been the number 2 population for 400 years. You're going to get kicked out of being number 2. You're going to go down and become number 4. Now, common sense, even a 3rd grade education would tell you, if you didn't get anything when you were number 2, you all jumped ahead of me, but anyway, you can guess what you're going to get when you become number 4.
President Biden, do you support reparations?
Well, I mean, since I haven't spoken on this, got a chance. Number one, the reason we're the country we are is because of immigration. We've been able to cherry pick the best from every single continent. The people who come here have determination, resilience. They are ready to stand up and work like the devil. We have 24 of every 100 children in our school today is Hispanic. The idea that we are going to walk away and not provide every opportunity for them is that not only stupid and immoral, but it's bad for America. They are the future of America.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
We are owed $104 trillion on the very low end, plus $735 billion recurring. This number does not include the cost of about 50 Black Wall Streets that were decimated, nor compound interest from 2017 when Sean D. Rochester's book, The Black Tax, was published, nor the cost of Black life, nor the cost of living increases, nor the war on drugs, nor the current day pandemic. The number I'm working with is for slavery, Jim Crow, and accrued ongoing systemic racism, oppression, and disadvantage in the country our ancestors built with their lives.
Good evening on the West Coast. Good evening in the mountain. Good evening in the central. Good evening on the East Coast. You know exactly who it is, family. Angela Nirvana, your hostess with the mostest on the Reparationist perspective, bringing you those Freedmen hot topics and making the case for reparations, making the case for weaponizing our vote, socializing our suffering. And today, family, I want to welcome you each, one and all, to the broadcast. We're here today to talk more about the way we've been legislated to the bottom of this Titanic as the anchor of this country's capitalism. Yeah, we got more to dig into. This topic came to bear because, as many of you know, the Freedmen Bank Forum, if you've watched any of my archives, or if you've joined me live, the Freedmen Bank Forum, hosted by Vice President Kamala Harris and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, pretty much, weaponized the Freedmen Bank to give $9 billion in set aside in loans and grants, really for the betterment of immigrants, to give them more money, to lend them more money, to give them more grants, to take over our communities, to become more American than us. Because, as many of you know that have been tuning in for some time now, we're dealing with the government hell-bent on ethnogenociding our people to as few in numbers as the Indians. And the way they're doing that is through the weaponization of immigration. Our numbers are on the decline as the numbers of refugees and immigrants, even the illegal ones, are on the rise. And they're getting all manner of our reparations to be made American because now the government has managed to weaponize them against us to neutralize us economically. Their goal is to neutralize our vote. So our numbers are declining. Their numbers are growing. I think my last count, there must have been, oh my goodness, a Zoom meeting. Lord have mercy. Just give me a moment. Oh, I didn't realize I had this meeting. Hold on, family. Just give me a second. Okay. I had a meeting. Oh, Lord, there's always so many meetings. I didn't realize I had this conflict. If I don't write everything in my calendar, Lord, today. Well, let me try to make this brief. Hold on, family. Okay, listen. This work is nonstop, and if I don't calendar everything, I run the risk of double booking. And I had to move this from 3 o'clock to what I thought was a free window at 7. Come to find out, I'm doing another meeting. We're getting ready to roll out a campaign to defeat HR 40 if it's not too late. They're very close to amassing the signatures they need on that, and it's just very, very flawed. Basically, it lacks specificity as to who the injured parties are and cash being attached to it, and lots of it over multi-generations. But I digress. As I was sharing with you before that text came through, I'm not going to keep you long, but I need you to understand all the ways in which our government has been complicit in neutralizing us economically, for you to understand that as you continue to go to the polls, voting blue no matter who, this is more of what you're voting for. So I was mentioning the Freedman Bank Forum. I want to start by playing the gentleman at one of the Hispanic gentlemen who came into the meeting and was able to take over the mic at a Freedman Bank Forum to talk about how much his banks in North Carolina have with respect to assets. And then I'll get into this article and try to get you guys out. Thank you so much for joining the broadcast. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications if you feel so compelled. Bless the broadcast. My Cash App and PayPal are scrolling in the bar below. So let's get into it, family. Let me stop this and share this real quick. Now, you're going to hear this Hispanic gentleman talk about how they've got about 126 ethnicities in the country. Many of you may have heard this on my Freedman Bank Forum live that was done some weeks ago. But I want to set the stage with this particular audio. So when we go over the numbers and how we got here in banking, okay, and how it's going to be even worse since the pandemic, you'll have some context. I'm framing this exchange within the confines of this gentleman at the Freedman Bank Forum, who is Hispanic, talking about what he intends to do with that $9 billion that was set aside. I do believe he was bequeathed $100 million, which took his bank. Let me not speculate. We'll listen to the numbers and go over them. I haven't listened to that audio in a while. But the reason why this topic came to bear was in my research to find out how to access those billions that was dispersed to hundreds of banks throughout the country in the name of Freedman. I learned this disturbing news about the health of Black banks and how we are on the bottom yet again in every metric in this country. And it's tragic because the banking system is no different. Let's get right into it, and then I'll dig into the article and make my commentary accordingly. Stand by. Thank you for joining the live. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Listen up, fam. Here we go. Oh, Lord.
Work closely with Treasury to be able to look at the larger needs that we see in the community. So when you ask, what will I do with the money? One, capital will be enhanced at the bank level, which will allow me to expand on the kind of loans that I'm doing in the community. Capital for many of the MDIs and CDFI institutions have historically been a challenge. And so these dollars allow us to meet capital levels that the regulators require, which allows us to lend more. That's one. Two, we will look at expanding our lending in our private sector entity, which will look at a combination of both patient capital in terms of mezzanine lending, as well as equity. Everything can't be debt. And debt is one of the fastest killers of so many of our businesses. They don't get an opportunity. They don't get an opportunity to live through the critical early periods that are necessary before they can actually take hold. Our third emphasis will be around supporting our SSBIC, which we took the initiative to establish ourselves in a position where we can further bring capital from the different levels of need that are there. So we talk about access. With these four different entities, it will allow us to create access. So we create capital, which allows greater lending at the bank. We create equity, and we create mezzanine, both in the CDC and the private equity. And what we also do is look at enhancing the technology, which allows us to reach out and touch aspects of the community that has not heretofore existed. What you all should know, and I say this in my brief comments as you take, many of the urban communities that you all look at or see know about food deserts. What you miss is that they're banking deserts. They're financial institution deserts. And so disproportionately, many of our constituents are left to go to fast money lenders, hot money lenders, check cash in places, and disproportionately spend resources that they can ill afford, which can be better used by their families. That's our focus, these dollars, and I'm delighted to say, and you'll see the report, we were a recipient of $71.2 million, and Mr. Secretary, Deputy Secretary, if you'll say to Secretary Yellen and the rest that I am delighted that we finally got to numbers that are realistic. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Luis Pastor. I came from Durham, North Carolina. And before that, I came from a different world, completely different world, before coming to the United States 21 years ago. And was the year that we started Latino Community Credit Union as a sad news, a sad response to a continuous attack to the immigrant community. But I think that we were in the journey to prove that we're not going to let the people tell our story. From a sad situation, we need to transform our institution into a very, very happy situation. And how do you do that? Just becoming the place of opportunity. Just becoming the place where you don't need to hide who you are. The place that we can pronounce your last name. The place that we can speak in your language. most of the time. The place where the largest fear that all of us have dealing with financial institutions is rejection. It's just going, it doesn't matter who we are. Every time that you go, you just don't want people because you feel that they are judging you as a person. They're not judging. And the problem is that most of the time, it's true. They judge you as a person. If you don't know, if you don't show, if you don't look, if you don't speak like the person that they're expecting. So 21 years later, we are in credit union world, we're a large credit union. We are 700 million in assets, soon to be 800 just with the money that we are going to be awarded. And recently, in the last few months, we started just offering mortgages in the surrounding states. In 3 months, we just booked mortgages in Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, on top of North Carolina. When we talk about individuals, communities that have been left out in every single economic crisis, there we are. They are the immigrants. And even don't let our name confuse you. Even we are called Latino Community Credit Union. We have immigrants from 136 countries in the world. So the exclusion is not just something that is only based on your country of origin. It's a common situation. We're going to keep expanding. We're going to keep opening opportunities. We're going to keep dreaming. The message that we have been giving to our community, more than 100,000 members that we have right now, is that when you are an immigrant, you come here, probably the public perception is that you need to be patient. You need to wait. You need to wait for sometimes for decades or sometimes for generations. And the reality is that we don't want to be patient. We don't want to wait because we want to have our house. We want to have our businesses. We want to contribute. We want to be able to provide some wealth and transfer this wealth to our kids because that's the reason why we came here, not to be patient. We want to be patient, we can stay where we are. But the whole system has been always telling us that you have enough just to survive another year, that you have enough to... So when suddenly institutions, treasury, super wealthy donors start seeing that through economic development is how you can start really building communities. It's time for us to realize that we don't need to be patient. We don't want to be patient. We need to realize that we are the solution that our community is looking for. We were started by our own leaders in our community because nobody was able to open an account for us. And now everybody's looking for the Latino market in North Carolina. You know what? Too late. Too late.
So there you have it, family. This gentleman here has been here 21 years, family. Stay with me now. He's been in the country 21 years. We've been here damn near, 500 years? Prior to 1619. His bank, his credit union, has $800 million in assets as compared to the merger of two banks, one in LA, one in DC. Okay. That merger will only amass $1 billion. It's not black owned, it's black led. And then this particular $9 billion set aside makes their credit union $800 million. They received $100 million as compared to the black gentleman over Harbor, Maryland Bank, who said he got $71 million. The gentleman from Harbor, Maryland Bank never once spoke in the way this Spanish guy did, Mr. Pasteur, the way he spoke on behalf of the 136 ethnicities that he's there to represent. The black bank official who was on that same stage in the name of the Freedman Bank Forum didn't mention helping us at all. He used those grift words like underserved communities, minorities, things of this nature, family, which doesn't include us. Now, why is that, you may ask? Why doesn't that include freedmen? Because this is the very weaponization of the immigration I've been sharing with you guys about time and time again, broadcast after broadcast after broadcast. These groups have been flooding into the country thanks to the Biden administration. It didn't start with him, but he sure enough is doing his fair share of contributing to oppressing and ethno-genociding freedmen by keeping our borders open while trying to get our military on the Ukraine border to corner them off into NATO to go to war with Russia at our expense. So these groups flood the country, and this government gives them our reparations, gives them housing, gives them job guarantees. And then we're told you've got to speak Spanish to get an interview. And even when you show up speaking Spanish as fluent as Pedro, you don't have the complexion for the protection, because Mr. Pastor, unakin to you, Freedman, can be made white. I've educated you guys. I know it's repetitive, but I want you to see the puckery from every angle through a Freedman lens. Because the only commodity we've got left is the power of our vote, which is fast waning. We're the only ones without an effective strategy wherein our lineage is concerned. Immigrants, by and large, when they make less than $50,000 a year, they're voting Democrat. When they're over 50K, they switch to the Republicans. The repugnant clans. That's what I call repugnant clans. Okay? 3 Ks. And yet, we continue to go to the polls voting blue no matter who, to our own lineage peril. Hi, Tassetti Townsend. Welcome to the live. Yes, so I need you to look at the puckery through every angle. I'm going to try my best not to cuss. It's difficult because we are clearly sheep walking to the polls to our own peril. We are showing up to vote against our own interests. And don't tell me nothing about how you stay home. You cannot afford to stay home when the immigrants are showing up. Our lineage can't afford for you to stay home because you don't have the temerity to do what our ancestors did. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's take this one bridge at a time. Let's eat the elephant one bite at a time. Let me share another headline before I get into my article. The one article I'm going to read is so much. I'm just going to read and comment on one. So let me share what's happening here. Okay, this is the article. Let me make sure you can see it. Welcome to the live. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. Okay, let me show you big, and then I'm going to go small so you can see me. Merger of 2 Black-led banks aims to help break a painful cycle. So I'm going to go through this article and keep this headline up so I can tell you all about what's going on. Keep in mind, our numbers are declining as this country is flooded, thanks to the Biden administration, with immigrants and refugees alike to our own peril. Okay? And I'm sure you're noticing it. But let's get into it. I know you notice it. Okay, hold on. Let me get to my article. I had to copy and paste the darn thing in a whole nother queue because it's forever giving me too many of these ads. So let's dig into it. And like I said, I'm commenting in between. Okay. Hold on. Los Angeles Broadway Federal Bank and Washington, D.C. City First Bank are merging to form the largest Black-led bank in the U.S., underscoring the challenges such banks have faced in generating enough capital to effectively serve their communities. Black-owned and led banks have long been caught in a difficult cycle. They tend not to have enough money to lend to help their communities build wealth, and the resulting dearth of wealth-building opportunities diminishes the money available to flow into the banks. Efforts to remedy that include the grassroots #BankBlack movement, as well as the merger announced Wednesday. Now, this is what I found. This article is dated from the LA Times, August 27, 2020. Let me refresh you for those of y'all just getting here. I started researching for my 501c4. You know, how do we access this $9 billion that's been set aside in the name of freedmen in order to give the come up to these immigrants? I just shared with you that the Black-owned bank of Harbor, Maryland Bank, received $71.2 million, but this Hispanic here, who already had $700 million assets for his credit union in the South, how this government, in the name of freedmen, gave them $30 million more dollars than they gave, $31 million more dollars than they gave the Black Bank of Maryland. That gentleman spoke about his intentions to take over Virginia, North Carolina, and Georgia. And there's been this whole movement trying to get us back south. But they've literally got the wealth position to take over the South. And that is his plan, to take over the South. And he's in a better position, along with their gainfully employed, who identify as white as a matter of convenience, and then people of color when that's convenient. They play both sides of the race card for the come up right over the top of freedmen, who have the highest rates of unemployment, underemployment, and homelessness in the country our ancestors built with their lives. Back to the text. Let me scroll down. Okay. To really make a difference in high-cost markets such as LA and DC, banks need to be able to write bigger checks, particularly to fund projects such as multifamily affordable housing or to finance small businesses and nonprofits, said Brian Argett, Chief Executive of City First Bank. Those three areas will be the combined bank's main focuses, he said. Now, let's go through this. Multifamily affordable housing or to finance small business and nonprofits. Okay? I want you to understand banking. Banking doesn't make money on deposits. Banking makes money on lending. And here in Los Angeles, in order to qualify for affordable housing, you need a median income of around $80,000. In order to qualify for affordable housing, you need to be making around 80K. So do you already see the setup here? With these two black banks that have merged, who are they going to be lending to if the median income for freedmen, black, U.S. black, in this state is between 35 and 40,000 since the pandemic? I'll wait. Who are they going to be lending to? This is going to be set up to give money and loans to immigrants, refugees, and white folks at a black bank that just had to merge in order to have a combined $1 billion in assets. And that Hispanic gentleman has been here for 21 years, and he's well on his way within the confines of his credit union to being close to $1 billion already, with the help of our government, who gave him $30 million more dollars than he gave to the black-owned Harbor, Maryland Bank. I just need you to see how you're being played, how we're being played, how we've been legislated here. And if we don't learn to weaponize our vote and socialize our suffering, it is a wrap. You will be helping these other groups to make you a permanent bottom caste and extinct us to as few in numbers as the Indians. Back to the text. The deal merging Broadway Federal's parent, Broadway Financial Corp., and City First parent, CF Bank Corp., will create a combined entity with more than $1 billion in assets. Described as a merger of equals, the deal is expected to close in the first quarter of 2021, and like Broadway Financial, the resulting firm will be publicly traded. The merger will give the combined bank more capital and capability, allowing it to direct more capital through loans and into the underlying communities that we both serve, said Arjett, who will be CEO of the new yet unnamed entity. Well, I think it's been named by now. I'll double check that. For years, many Black-owned and led banks have been limited by their relative lack. Oh, yeah, it has been. I think it's now called City First Bank. It was once Broadway Federal. When they merged, they took the DC title. That's, like I said, just doing my research, trying to get the funds into Freedmen's hands here in the state. Last year, there were 21 such banks in the U.S., down from 48 in 2001, according to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corp. Those 21 banks had assets totaling $4.85 billion. That same year, family, in 2001, 21 banks. Last year, there were 21 such banks in the U.S. In 2019, that same year, the 33 to our 21 Latino owned or led banks in the U.S. had $109 billion in assets. The black banks, remember, stick a pin in it, 21 banks with $4.85 billion in total assets, compared the same year, 2019, 33 Latino-owned or led banks with $109 billion in assets. Let's do the math. Break out your calculators. Let's look at how much more times wealthy their banks are compared to ours. So, they've got 12 more institutions than we do, but 109 minus 4.85. They are $104.15 billion more liquid than our banks. We've been here for 400 years. He's been here 21 years. We've been here 400. And they're combined, they got 12 more banks than we do, which has $104.15 billion more assets than we do. Let's look at the Asian-owned or led banks. 72 of their banks, hold on. They've got 51 more banks, these Asians do, and 129 billion in assets. Do the math. Their banks are $124.15 billion more in assets than our banks, and our ancestors built this country with their lives. Now, those totals pale in comparison with the holdings of the nation's major banks. In July, for example, Wells Fargo alone said it had 1.97 trillion. These are the banks that were invested in our enslavement, that got rich off of our enslavement, that killed and stole from our ancestors' heinous chattel slave labor. And Wells Fargo by itself was 1.97 trillion in assets as compared to Black banks' 4.85 billion. And this is what happens when you don't weaponize your vote and socialize your suffering. When you continue to go to the polls and gift the White House to the Dixiecrats. When you throw away your vote on third party, when you vote Dixiecrat down the ticket, instead of neutralizing your most imminent threat, which is immigration and refugees. You are setting up your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren to be beggars in the country our ancestors built with their very lives as chattel. Back to the text. Black-owned and led banks need to increase the number of checking and savings accounts, business lines of credit, mortgages, and other loans to significantly move the needle, said William Michael Cunningham, economist and CEO of consulting firm Creative Investment Research. The lack of Black wealth means that you don't have a community asset base you can utilize to create larger Black financial institutions, he said. The money just is not there because of institutional systemic racism and the weaponization of immigration against freedmen to ethno-genocide us right up out this piece. The article didn't say that. That's my ad, okay? Back to the text. The Great Recession of 2007 to 2009 hit Black-owned and led banks and their borrowers especially hard. Me speaking. We got so caught up in the Kenyan white descendant of slave owners, Barack Obama, we were so caught up that we went out for 2 turns and this Mickey Ficky bailed out Wall Street and the banks and did not put regulations and audits on their assets to guarantee that our tax dollars were coming back through to us to make us whole when we got wiped out. Over 50% lost their only wealth, which were their homes. And for 2 terms, we put him in office for him to say no to reparations after being complicit in our oppression with his family members, Bush and Cheney. He's even said out of his own mouth that he's more Repugnant Klan than he is a Dixiecrat. You'll have to look up the audio on that. I'm not fooling with his ass right now. And yet, most of our people still revere him today as if he is the freaking second coming. I was done after his 2 terms. Absolutely and completely done. I went independent. And now God's given me a vision for a voter strategy to neutralize our most imminent threat, immigration. And so we've got to do that because you ain't got no reparations coming if they continue to put POC and black white oppressors in office who are quick to tell you the same racist white tropes that have been happening since we fought and won our emancipation, to pull ourselves up by our bootless straps as we were turned loose to freedom to our own peril. And we refuse to leave. And then comes in all the other atrocities to add to the Holocaust of the freedmen, to the point where we're declining as the other POC and black white oppressors are growing in number. So you've got Barack Obama to thank for why we were hardest hit in these adjustable rate mortgages. Last to be hired, first to be fired. Suppressed wages. Can't keep up with the mortgage when the rates adjust the way they did between 07 and 09. During that, it's so bad right now, family, since the pandemic, that our national median income doesn't even qualify the majority of us to take the equity out of our properties if we're fortunate enough to still have them. Here in the state of California, you got to be making around $80,000 to pull $100K out of your home. And these homes, depending on what you owe, have doubled, tripled, and quadrupled in equity. So if you're trying to educate your children or start a new business or buy more real estate, you don't even qualify out here because why? The median income is between $35,000 and $40,000. You can't qualify to take the money out your house. But immigrants and white folks sure can. Back to the text. During that recession, median net wealth declined for black families by 44.3%, compared with 26.1% for white families. We all know why. The white family come from a line that killed and stole our wealth. And to this day, they continue to come up with policies and legislation to make sure we can never even come up for air. Barack Obama included. This pandemic was designed to ethno-genocide us in particular. I don't know about you, but I heard of many people, freedmen, who were showing up to the hospitals and being turned away and told to go home until they were feeling so bad they were near death, only to come back to the hospitals to be intubated. No family could come in to see them. They had no patient advocate. The next thing you know, the family's getting a call that they are no longer here. Story after story after story. Prior to my mom passing away, prior to her passing away, she must have had 12 to 15 close friends and family members succumb to this virus. Because what these hospitals were doing was performing medical apartheid. You were showing up and they sent you home until you were near death, only to bring you back to intubate you, and it's a wrap after that. They weren't giving the people the remdesivir that my nephew received, which enabled him to see his 32nd birthday. That was $5,000 a shot. And if he had not had his private physician watching over him after the hospitals on the black side of town sent him home to quarantine, had he not had a patient advocate in my sister, he would have never seen his 32nd birthday. That doctor, his private physician, saw his health deteriorate and told her to rush him to the hospital on the white side of town, who admitted him for a week and administered 5 days of remdesivir. That's $25,000. That wasn't happening to Friedman. Back to the text. That disproportionate toll had a filter effect onto Black businesses, including Black banks, said Michael Neal, senior research associate in the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute think tank. With fewer assets, the banks cannot lend as much as larger financial institutions, particularly in areas such as mortgage lending, which helps homeowners build wealth and is also profitable for banks, Neal said. Black-owned and led banks also typically have a more limited selection of services, particularly those that help customers generate more wealth, such as brokerage services. Quote, the asset base is too small for them to have a measurable economic impact on the Black community, Cunningham said. That's just the bottom line. There have been recent efforts to increase deposits. Like I said, me speaking, deposits are not the way these banks make money. It's through lending. I mean, if you like Netflix up in this piece, those deposits can make money, but not the deposit of Black folks. Anyway, and streaming giant Netflix pledged in June to invest up to $100 million in financial institutions that support Black communities. What was happening, family, was a lot of these large corporations like Netflix were pouring in money into the Black banks after it took for Mr. George Floyd to be executed by the Glacier Donkey race soldier Chauvin before these corporations even attempted to help. But it's in vain. As long as there is hundreds of trillions of dollars egregious racial wealth gap to pour this money into the banks. Just like Barack Obama, he refused to pour the money into Main Street so the money could be spent. He gave it to the very nefarious Wall Streets and the banks. And we lost, this article says, 44.3% of our wealth, our homes. It was greater than that, but okay, we'll go with that number. Pledged in June to invest up to $100 million in financial institutions that support Black communities. But even that amount is not enough to demonstrably and measurably improve the economic well-being of the Black community, Cunningham said. Yeah, because they don't qualify for loans. Their credit scores are by and large in the toilet. I'm talking Freeman Black. I ain't talking Black immigrants who are 1,000 times more wealthy than Freeman Black down up in this piece, okay? All throughout the country, immigrant Black is doing far better than Freedman Black, and that's by design. They pick the best and the brightest to come over here to be our Black white oppressors and tell us, look at me. If I can do it in your foreign country, what's wrong with you? Stop being so shiftless, lazy, no good and no count. You can be as wealthy as me, and they're still second to us. Hispanics are still, neck and neck with black immigrants in terms of wealth position. Then white folks, then Asian Indians, Asians and Asian Indians are far more wealthy. Yeah, you cannot improve the economic well-being of the black community if they have the highest rates of unemployment, underemployment, and of the homeless families in the nation, we are over half of those. So that's why we've been fighting for reparations. I'm fighting for reparations in the quadrillions based on Thomas Kramer's number. He calculated slave hourly wage at 3 cents per hour, 15-hour days from 1776 to 1865, compounded at 6% to get 6.2 quadrillion. And I don't need for us to get it all at one time. We can do as they did with the pandemic money. Monthly deposits are perfect. Because if it took you 400 years to drive us into the bottom as the anchor of the capitalism that our ancestors built with their lives, it's going to take at least twice as long to pull us out. And this is why. Because it doesn't matter how much money you infuse into a bank if it can't benefit freedmen, who by and large don't have the credit scores, who by and large are overladen with debt for survival, who by and large are highest unemployed and underemployed. They don't qualify. And they don't need loans, no how. They need grants. You need to just start stroking checks. Black-owned banks arose as a response to racial hostilities toward Black Americans, according to Mercer Baradaran's book, The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap, which documents the history and significance of those banks. The first Black-owned bank in the U.S. grew out of Industrial Building and Savings Company, an institution that primarily invested in mortgage lending and whose first president was famed abolitionist Frederick Douglass. In its first 4 years, Industrial Building and Savings Co. helped finance 60 homes in Washington, D.C. In 1988, Capital Savings Bank opened up after Grover Cleveland was elected president. Black Americans feared that post-Civil War freedoms and opportunities could erode under the Democratic Party, especially in the South, according to a history published by the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. In its first year, Capital Savings Bank received $117,000 in deposits. Let me take a breath because the Freedman Bank comes to mind. And how these white folks in the government pillaged the Freedman Bank, the Freedman Bureau Bank. You have to look that up. I don't have time to go over it, but each and every time, family, I'm just trying to show you that we pulled ourselves up by our bootless straps to make things happen. They came through and robbed and killed and pillaged. So this was in 1888. In its first year, Capital Savings Bank received $117,000 in deposits. That number quickly grew. Over its first 4 years in operation, the Washington, D.C. based financial institution had a total of about $2 million in deposits, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. So what we have accomplished in these brief years has been accomplished in the face of greater opposition than we have any reason to expect will confront us again, the bank's secretary told a reporter around its 5th year of operation, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. Since then, Black-owned and Black-led banks have faced a host of challenges. Some were forced by regulators to shut, even as larger financial institutions received government aid when they were near failure. Doesn't this remind you of Sherman Order number 15, giving us 40 acres and a mule? Then Lincoln was assassinated and Johnson took that 40 acres and a mule. He took it back. And then the white immigrants and the white slaveholders were bequeathed, 100 years or more of the Homestead Act. So some were forced by regulators to shut down, even as the larger white financial institutions received what? Government aid when they were near failure. We were forced to shut down. One example is Pittsburgh's Dwelling House Savings and Loan Association, which was closed by the Treasury Department's Office of Thrift Supervision in 2009. Months before its closure, the Office of Thrift Supervision had deemed the bank critically undercapitalized and gave it a deadline to fix the problem, according to the Pittsburgh Business Times. A bank official told the publication at the time that more than $3 million had been stolen from the bank through fraudulent transactions. Just before its closure, Dwelling House had $13.4 million in assets, according to the FDIC. After it shut, its only location was turned into a PNC bank branch. Who is PNC? Let me tell you what the acronym stands for. This is an Asian-owned and operated bank. Let's see who PNC, what does PNC stand for? I'm trying to get, what is PNC? What does PNC stand for? The tower at PNC Plaza, headquarters of PNC Financial Services. Pittsburgh National Corporation, Provident National Corporation, founded April 10, 1845, operational. Okay, I might be confusing it with a different bank. Hold on, family. Let me just make sure I'm telling you the truth. Give me a second. Because, yes, my apologies. I'm confusing PNC with PCB. That's the one that's Asian, okay? Forgive me for that misstep in what I was sharing. In shutting some Black-owned banks, regulators neglected to consider the social impact and the other services that these tiny, tiny institutions were providing to the Black community, Cunningham said. The philosophy of Boston-based One United Bank, the largest Black-owned bank in the U.S., is based on a historical effort to harness the economic spending power of Black America and channel that power back into the community. In this spirit, the bank offers second chance checking to customers who might not be able to open accounts elsewhere because of their imperfect banking histories. You see, our communities are flooded with payday loan operations. Our communities need to go to check cashing centers because our poverty is profitable for these white Mickey Fickies. Back to the text. We want to give people an opportunity that wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to be successful, CEO Kevin Cohey said. Federal legislation is in the works that would provide more support for community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions, which include Black-owned and led banks. Introduced by Representative Gregory Meeks, a Democrat in New York, the bill would create, among other things, a program that would allow minority depository institutions to receive some deposits from certain Treasury Department accounts. This sounds to me like that $9 billion set aside in the name of the Freedmen Bank Forum that Freedmen won't see a dime of if we don't get proactive and go up in there and demand it on our terms. Investing in these institutions allows them to address the immediate needs and concerns of not-for-profits and small businesses and regular community members, Meeks said. You will never have a level playing field if you don't have the access to capital. We still don't. You're talking immigrants here, and refugees will have that kind of access as minorities, as underserved communities, while being set up with jobs and housing that freedmen are denied. Banks operating in lower income communities typically need access to other resources such as support from corporate America or government entities. Efforts to create space for Black-owned banks, such as the Federal Community Reinvestment Act passed in 1977 to fight racial discrimination in lending, must be paired with concrete financial commitments to better support these institutions. Otherwise, they simply wither away. One United's Cohee said. One grassroots movement aimed to do just that. Launched in 2016 after fatal police shootings of Black men, the hashtag Bank Black movement calls for Black people to deposit money into Black-owned banks to support the community. What communities? We have very few communities anymore, family, throughout the country. We've been gentrified and ethno-genocide, right about that piece by the Glacier Donkey Race soldiers, which the FBI told us that in 2006, they've infiltrated all the police departments throughout the country. Biden chooses to give $350 billion with a B more dollars to these same Glacier Donkey Race soldiers to finish the job, along with $30 million to white and immigrant-run drug programs in the name of the crack epidemic, which is really the opioid epidemic, which I shared with you in yesterday's broadcast. These Mexican cartels that are free to come and cross the border are going through and lacing the drugs that Biden administration is going to provide the needles and the crack pipes for our people to be ethno-genocide some more. Back to the text. The hashtag Bank Black movement helped boost One United's customer base by at least 40,000 since the end of May, and customer service calls have increased 50% in that time. The company also saw a record $50 million in deposits, Cohee said. Stop right there. Who are they talking about, family? If we have the highest rates of unemployment, underemployment, and homelessness, how did we increase the customer base by 40,000 at the end of May? And what was this, 2020? Customer service calls have increased, and there was a record 50 million in deposits. How did we do that? But there are limits to what this movement can do. While the hashtag has brought attention to Black-owned banks, banks actually make money off loans rather than deposits, said author Baradaran, who is also Associate Dean and Professor of Law at UC Irvine's Law School. They don't need deposits, they need lending opportunities, she said. Black banks need more capital. They need for these government programs to be helping them rather than going to the big banks, big businesses. Ergo, this $9 billion was set aside in the name of the Freedmen Bank Forum, and Mr. Pasteur received $100 million to grow his assets in his Hispanic, Latino-led owned and operated credit union as compared to the black gentleman of the Harbor, Maryland Bank, who received $71.2 million. He been here 21 years. We've been here for 400 plus years. So they'll weaponize our Holocaust to give a come up to line their own pockets, white folks, that is, and that of immigrants and refugees, while telling us no to reparations and not even a down payment to close the egregious racial wealth gap created by them. Cohey said One United can't rely solely on the hashtag Bank Black movement, noting that the bank's larger size and proprietary technology have led to its success. Banks don't exist in a vacuum unhindered by the larger economic conditions its customers face. Ergo, the new weapon to wipe us completely off the monopoly board in the name of the pandemic. And now, the Biden administration, I think, is giving about $12 billion to Ukraine. And Putin has said, your sanctions mean you declare war. So we're officially at war with Russia, in case you didn't get the memo. In The Color of Money, Baradaran argues that housing segregation and racist credit policies create an inescapable economic trap for Black communities and their banks. Black banking has been an anemic response to racial inequality that has yielded virtually nothing in closing the egregious racial wealth gap. Baradaran wrote, Black-owned banks that operate on a community-based model often struggle because they seek to serve lower-income communities of color where credit is poor due to a history of discrimination, One United's Cohey said. At the core of it, it's racism. He said, banks tend to perform better in places where people have more money. In spite of their limitations, Black-owned and Black-led banks are still key lenders for Black borrowers. Few brick-and-mortar banks exist in some rural parts of the U.S., as well as in some predominantly Black neighborhoods, resulting in so-called banking deserts. With no other options, residents sometimes are forced to lean on higher-priced financial services or predatory lenders. Black-owned banks are really serving a community that often finds it more difficult to get loans elsewhere, Neil said. Black banks can lend to people in neighborhoods that historically have experienced systemic racism and are just not getting the same amount of capital investment. Not if you don't make concessions for their credit score and the fact that they are the highest rates of unemployed and underemployed. You won't be helping us. You will be helping immigrants and refugees. Let's see what y'all got to say about it. I'm done with my rant. I just need y'all to understand, family. You cannot afford to stay at home this midterm. You cannot. You cannot afford to vote third party. I do want to encourage you to at least go and register as an independent. Make sure you check your laws and make sure there's no funny business when it's time to vote in these midterms. I need y'all to show up in Obama-style numbers and only vote for closed border candidates to neutralize our most imminent threat, immigration. We are out of time. And the only two Democrats I highly recommend that you vote for are reparationist candidates Marcel Dixon in District 6, South Carolina, to unseat the Coon Clyburn, who has the sixth poorest district out of something like 436 districts in all of the U.S. He is the whip, the majority whip in the Democratic Dixiecrat Party. He's got to go, and Marcel, he's outmoneyed Marcel. I think he's got $2 million or greater in his war chest. or maybe that's Warnock. I'm not really sure, but the Democrats are flooding money. So we've got to weaponize the only thing we've got left, which is our vote. And the other Democrat I'm recommending that you vote for is reparationist candidate Tamara Johnson-Shealy. She and Warnock are the only two running on that Democratic ticket, while the Republican ticket is split 10 ways. If you choose to stay home, don't complain about how this thing turns out, because I can guarantee you the immigrants are showing up in droves. We're out of time, family. We are out of time. And with that being said, family, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, turn on your notifications. If you feel so compelled, please bless the broadcast. It's in the description box below, and it's scrolling on the blue bar below. I'm going to try my best to get back to you guys tomorrow. Can't guarantee the time, but I am going to do my best to be here as often as I can. Until then, family, I want to share with you that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever Freeman and his allies are, God truly is. Because, family, you are the face of God, the voice of God, the body temple of the Spirit of the living God. Yes, you are. If no one told you today, family, know this. The love, I love you, Black, and I love you so strong, family. Yes, I do. And until we meet again tomorrow, family, I want you to make it a beautiful, God-inspired rest of your evening. Until then, I'm sending you a ton of peace, love, and reparations, reparations, reparations.